Before we begin, tell me something about yourself in the comments. How old are you? Where are you from? Are you in a relationship? Or is there someone special on your mind right now? You never know when your story might help someone else feel a little less alone. The day my divorce became official, the sky over Chicago was the color of old silver, and somehow that felt appropriate. People always talk about freedom as if it arrives with fireworks and celebration, but mine showed up in a plain manila envelope and a quiet apartment that suddenly felt too large for one person. I remember standing by the kitchen counter, staring at the final paperwork while my coffee grew cold beside me. 10 years of marriage reduced to a few signatures and a polite email from my attorney wishing me the best. I wish I could tell you I cried. I wish I could tell you I felt relieved. The truth was stranger than either of those things. I felt empty, not broken, not devastated, just empty, like a theater after the audience has gone home. My name is Claire Morgan, and at 42 years old, I thought I knew exactly what the next chapter of my life looked like. Work, stability, independence, no more risks, no more heartbreak. No more believing in promises that sounded beautiful but dissolved under pressure. For 3 years after my separation, I built my event planning business one client at a time. Weddings, fundraisers, corporate galas. I organized other people's celebrations while quietly avoiding any reason to celebrate myself. It was safer that way, predictable. Then, at exactly 3:17 that afternoon, my phone rang. I almost ignored it. Unknown number. Probably another vendor or someone asking for a discount. Instead, I answered. The voice on the other end belonged to a woman named Samantha, executive assistant to Victoria Hayes. Even before she said the name, I recognized it. Everyone did. Victoria Hayes was one of the most successful CEOs in America. Her company dominated headlines. Business magazines called her brilliant. Financial analysts called her unstoppable. Employees called her demanding. Samantha explained that Hayes Global was hosting its annual New Year's Eve gala in just under 3 weeks and needed a new lead planner immediately after their previous agency withdrew unexpectedly. The budget was generous. The timeline was impossible. Naturally, I said yes. 2 days later, I found myself standing in the lobby of Hayes Global headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling glass reflected the winter sunlight. Executives moved through the building with the confidence of people who always knew where they were going. I smoothed my navy blazer, adjusted the folder in my hands, and reminded myself this was just another client, another project, another paycheck. Then the elevator doors opened. A woman stepped out surrounded by silence so complete it felt deliberate, tall, blonde, elegant without trying. Her gray eyes swept across the lobby and landed on me for half a second before moving on, yet something about that brief glance unsettled me. Not because she was famous, not because she was beautiful, because for a moment it felt like she recognized me, and somehow that impossible feeling followed me all the way into the meeting room where Victoria Hayes was waiting. The conference room overlooked downtown Chicago from the 38th floor, offering a view that most people would probably find breathtaking. I barely noticed it. My attention was fixed on the woman standing at the far end of the polished table. Victoria Hayes looked exactly like the photographs that appeared in business magazines, except photographs failed to capture presence. There was something about the way she occupied a room that made everyone else seem slightly less important. As I stepped inside, she closed the folder she had been reading and looked directly at me. That same strange feeling returned. Recognition, not from my side, from hers. It lasted only a moment before her expression settled into professional calm. "Ms. Morgan," she said. Her voice was smooth, confident, and surprisingly warm. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." I took the offered seat and placed my portfolio on the table. "Thank you for the opportunity." The meeting began like any other corporate consultation. Budgets, venue logistics, guest projections, security requirements, catering preferences. I had handled events for wealthy clients before, and most of them treated planners as if they were invisible. Victoria did the opposite. She listened carefully whenever I spoke. She asked thoughtful questions. More than once, I noticed her studying me when she thought I was focused on my notes. It was not uncomfortable exactly, just unusual. By the end of the first hour, I had outlined 3 possible concepts for the gala. The executive team seemed pleased. Several department heads excused themselves for other meetings until eventually only Victoria and I remained in the room. I gathered my documents and prepared to leave when she surprised me. "Would you stay a few minutes longer?" she asked. "There are a few details I would like to discuss privately." Her assistant closed the door behind her, leaving us alone. The room suddenly felt quieter. I sat back down. "Of course!" Victoria walked toward the window, folding her arms loosely. For several seconds, she stared at the city below before turning back toward me. "Your business has grown considerably during the last 3 years." The comment caught me off guard. "I suppose it has. You rebuilt it from scratch after your divorce." I blinked. "That information is not on my company website." A faint smile touched her lips. "No, it is not. Most people would have found that unsettling." Oddly enough, I did not. I was more curious than alarmed. "You did your research." "I always do." There was something in her tone that suggested the explanation was incomplete. Before I could respond, she shifted the conversation back to the event. We spent another 30 minutes reviewing schedules and vendor options. Everything should have felt routine. Instead, I left the building carrying a strange awareness that lingered long after the meeting ended. Over the next week, preparations intensified. My days became a blur of conference calls, venue inspections, floral consultations, and late-night spreadsheets. Yet every meeting with Victoria followed the same pattern. Professional on the surface, slightly personal underneath. She remembered details I had mentioned only once. My favorite coffee order, the fact that my brother lived in Milwaukee, the rescue dog I adopted after my divorce. Small things, harmless things, but enough to make me wonder why she paid such close attention. One snowy Thursday evening, we met at the ballroom that would host the gala. Workers were testing lighting rigs while decorators assembled sample displays. Victoria arrived wearing a charcoal coat dusted with snowflakes. The winter air followed her inside, carrying the faint scent of cedar and cold wind. Together we walked across the empty ballroom floor, discussing seating arrangements. "You always work this hard?" she asked. "Only when someone gives me an impossible deadline." She laughed softly. The sound surprised me. Public interviews always portrayed her as serious and controlled. This version felt different, more human. "I may have done that." "You definitely did that." Her smile widened. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ballroom lights reflected in the polished floor between us. Outside, snow drifted past the enormous windows overlooking the river. It should have been an ordinary silence. Somehow it was not. My pulse quickened for reasons I could not fully explain. Then Victoria broke eye contact and looked toward the stage. "The event will be perfect," she said quietly. "I trust you." 4 simple words, yet they stayed with me the entire drive home. Later that night, after I changed into sweatpants and settled onto my couch with a mug of tea, my phone buzzed, an email from Victoria. I assumed it was another revision request. Instead, it contained a single sentence. "Would you be available for dinner tomorrow evening to discuss something unrelated to the gala?" I stared at the screen far longer than necessary. Something told me the next conversation was going to change everything. I spent most of Friday telling myself I was overthinking a simple dinner invitation. Successful executives invited contractors to dinner all the time. At least that was the excuse I repeated while standing in front of my closet for nearly 20 minutes trying to decide what to wear. By 6:30 that evening, I was walking into a quiet restaurant overlooking the Chicago River. Soft jazz drifted through the air. Candlelight reflected against the windows. The entire place felt elegant without being intimidating. Victoria was already there. She stood when she saw me approaching, and something in her expression softened. It was subtle, a brief warmth that disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for inviting me." The hostess guided us to a private table near the windows. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the dark water. Inside, everything felt calm and strangely removed from the chaos of the holiday season. At first, the conversation stayed comfortably professional. We talked about travel, business, favorite cities, and embarrassing work stories. I learned that Victoria drank tea instead of coffee, preferred bookstores to parties, and secretly loved old black and white movies. None of it matched the image the media had created around her. The woman sitting across from me seemed thoughtful, funny, and surprisingly easy to talk to. More than once, I caught myself smiling without realizing it. Hours passed faster than they should have. Eventually, dessert plates were cleared away, and a quieter atmosphere settled over the table. Victoria traced the rim of her water glass for a moment before looking up. The confidence she carried so effortlessly during meetings seemed different now, less certain, almost nervous. That alone was enough to capture my full attention. "Claire," she said softly, "there is actually a reason I asked you here tonight." My pulse quickened. I suspected there might be. She exhaled slowly. For a second, she seemed to search for the right words. "What I am about to ask is going to sound unusual." I laughed lightly. "That is not exactly reassuring." A small smile appeared on her lips, but it faded quickly. "Please hear me out before you answer." Suddenly, every instinct I had was fully awake. "Okay." Victoria held my gaze. The restaurant noise seemed to fade into the background. Even the city outside felt distant. "I need someone to accompany me to several New Year's events." I nodded slowly. "That sounds manageable." "Not as an event planner." The knot forming in my stomach tightened. "Then as what?" She looked directly into my eyes. "As my wife." For a moment, I was convinced I had misunderstood her. The sentence simply refused to make sense. I stared at her, waiting for clarification that did not come. "You're what?" I finally asked. "My wife." The words sounded no less shocking the second time. I blinked twice. "Victoria, I know. You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." My heart was beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Around us, people continued eating dinner, unaware that my entire evening had just been turned upside down. "Are you proposing some kind of role?" I asked carefully. "A temporary arrangement?" "Yes." Her voice remained calm. "For 1 week." I leaned back in my chair. Every rational thought I possessed seemed to be colliding at once. "Why me?" The question escaped before I could stop it. For the first time that evening, Victoria hesitated. "Because I trust you." It was not a complete answer. We both knew it. Yet there was something genuine in the way she said it. Something vulnerable. "You barely know me." "I know enough." The strange feeling that had followed me since our first meeting returned stronger than ever. She was still hiding something. I could feel it. "Victoria, this is completely insane." A soft laugh escaped her. "I am aware." Despite myself, I laughed too. The tension eased for a moment. Then reality settled back in. "Why would anyone believe this?" I asked. "Because for a week, we would give them every reason to." She reached into her handbag and removed a slim folder. Sliding it across the table, she said, "Everything is explained inside. Read it before you decide. If your answer is no, I will understand." I looked down at the folder resting between us, then back at her. Her expression remained composed, but something in her eyes told a different story. For the first time since meeting Victoria Hayes, I saw someone who genuinely wanted something and was not certain she would get it. And somehow that realization made it impossible for me to walk away immediately. The folder sat on my kitchen counter for almost an hour before I finally opened it. Outside, snow drifted past the windows in soft white ribbons, while my rescue dog, Oliver, slept at my feet completely unaware that my life had become absurd. I expected to find legal contracts, publicity agreements, or some elaborate corporate presentation. Instead, I found a surprisingly simple proposal. a one-week arrangement, public appearances together, a holiday charity gala, a New Year's Eve celebration, several family gatherings, photographs, interviews if necessary. The role was clear. For 7 days, I would appear to be Victoria Hayes's spouse. I read the document twice, then a third time. The details explained what would happen. They did not explain why. The next morning, I called her. She answered before the first ring finished. Claire. Hearing my name in her voice sent an unexpected flutter through my chest. I have questions. I assumed you would. A lot of questions. Her quiet laugh traveled through the phone. Would lunch help? 2 hours later, we were seated in a private corner of a small restaurant, several blocks away from corporate headquarters. Unlike our first dinner, neither of us bothered with small talk. I placed the folder on the table between us. Start from the beginning. Victoria folded her hands. For the first time since I met her, she looked tired. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. My family hosts a New Year's gathering every year, she said. This year is especially important. Why? She looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. Because they have spent the last decade trying to convince me that success means nothing unless I build the exact life they expect. I listened quietly. And what life is that? Marriage, appearances, tradition. Her smile carried no humor, the usual checklist. So this is about family pressure? Partly. The answer felt incomplete again. Everything about Victoria seemed wrapped in layers she revealed one piece at a time. And the other part? I asked. She hesitated. I am tired of attending every event alone. Something about the honesty in her voice caught me off guard. Not because the admission was dramatic, because it sounded real, human, vulnerable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The server arrived with coffee and disappeared again. Victoria stared out the window before continuing. People assume loneliness disappears when success arrives. Her fingers traced the handle of her cup. It does not. I understood that feeling better than I wanted to admit. After my divorce, people constantly congratulated me on my independence. Very few asked whether independence could sometimes feel lonely too. You still have not explained why you chose me, I said softly. Victoria looked at me for several seconds, long enough that my pulse became annoyingly aware of itself. Because when I am around you, I do not feel like a CEO. The answer settled over me with unexpected weight. I looked away first. The conversation drifted into silence, not uncomfortable silence, thoughtful silence. Outside, pedestrians hurried through the cold, carrying shopping bags and coffee cups. Life moved normally while mine seemed to pause. Finally, I took a breath. Hypothetically, I said, if I agreed to this ridiculous plan, Victoria's eyes immediately lifted toward mine. Hope flashed across her face so quickly it was almost invisible. Hypothetically, then I would have one condition. She blinked. A condition? A non-negotiable one. To my surprise, she smiled. Not a polished corporate smile. A genuine one. I am listening. I leaned forward slightly. For the entire week, you stopped being Victoria Hayes, billionaire executive. One eyebrow rose. That sounds difficult. You live like a normal person. Define normal. No assistants following you everywhere. No special treatment. No private drivers unless absolutely necessary. No hiding behind work. Her expression shifted from amusement to disbelief. Claire, you asked for my help. You want me to spend a week pretending to be ordinary? No, I held her gaze. I want you to spend a week discovering whether you already are. For several seconds, she said nothing at all. Then, slowly, she smiled and shook her head. You may be the only person in America who would negotiate with me this way. Is that a yes? Victoria extended her hand across the table. Her gray eyes never left mine. It is a yes. The agreement began the following Monday, and within the first 12 hours I learned two important things. First, Victoria Hayes was genuinely trying to honor our arrangement. Second, she had absolutely no idea how ordinary people lived. I discovered this when she arrived outside my office building in a sleek black town car with a driver, two assistants, and enough security to escort a visiting diplomat. I folded my arms and stared through the windshield while snowflakes drifted across the hood. A moment later, Victoria stepped out, immediately recognizing the problem from my expression. "Good morning," she said cautiously. "No." She glanced behind her. "No? Absolutely not." One of her assistants looked horrified. Victoria looked amused. "Claire, it is just transportation." "Victoria, there are more people involved in your commute than my entire company employs." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. 10 minutes later, the driver and assistants were gone. Victoria stood beside me on a crowded city sidewalk, carrying her own bag for what was probably the first time in years. "This feels strange," she admitted. "Good. You enjoy this entirely too much." Also true. We spent the morning reviewing final preparations for the gala before heading across town to meet a florist. Normally, Victoria would have arranged private meetings in elegant offices. Instead, we waited in line behind three construction workers ordering coffee. I watched her study the scene with quiet fascination. "What?" I asked. "Nothing." That was definitely something. She smiled into her coffee cup. "I cannot remember the last time I stood in line for anything. That is mildly concerning. Probably." Another small laugh. Another moment where she seemed less like a corporate legend and more like a woman, rediscovering the world around her. By lunchtime, we stopped at a neighborhood grocery store because I needed ingredients for dinner. Victoria followed me through the aisles, pushing a shopping cart with the cautious focus of someone navigating unfamiliar territory. At one point, she stopped in front of an entire wall of breakfast cereal. "There are too many options." I looked over. "You are overwhelmed by cereal? There are 47 varieties. That is not a real problem. It feels like one." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped a loaf of bread into the cart. The sound echoed down the aisle. When I looked back at her, she was watching me. Not the way people usually watch when they are waiting for a conversation to continue. Something softer, warmer. My smile faded slightly as awareness settled between us. Then an elderly woman pushing a cart interrupted the moment. "You two make a lovely couple." The comment arrived so unexpectedly that I almost choked. Victoria blinked. The woman smiled and continued walking before either of us could respond. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Victoria cleared her throat. "Well." A faint blush touched my cheeks. To my surprise, Victoria looked equally unsettled. That evening, we carried groceries into my apartment because part of the arrangement required her participation in ordinary life. Oliver greeted us enthusiastically, immediately deciding Victoria was one of his favorite people on earth. "Traitor," I told my dog. Victoria knelt to scratch behind his ears. He has excellent judgment. Together we cooked dinner while snow fell outside the windows. It was nothing elaborate. Pasta, salad, and fresh bread. Yet the simple routine felt strangely comfortable. At one point, I caught myself forgetting that our arrangement was temporary. Forgetting that this entire situation had started as a bizarre proposal over dinner. We ate at my kitchen table while soft music played in the background. Conversation drifted naturally from childhood memories to favorite holiday traditions. For the first time, Victoria spoke about her parents, not the public version, the real version, the expectations, the pressure, the constant feeling that achievement was never quite enough. I listened quietly. When she finished, the room settled into silence. "That sounds exhausting," I said. Victoria looked down at her hands before meeting my eyes again. "It is." There was vulnerability in her expression that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Not pity, something else. Something I was not ready to examine too closely. Outside, the snowfall continued. Inside, the apartment felt warm and peaceful. As the evening came to an end, Victoria stood by the door preparing to leave. Oliver sat beside her as if guarding a new friend. "Thank you," she said softly. "For dinner? For today?" I smiled. "You survived grocery shopping. That deserves recognition." Her laughter filled the room. Then she paused, just for a second. "This was the best day I have had in a very long time. And for reasons I could not explain, hearing that mattered far more than it should have. The next 3 days passed in a blur of holiday preparations, vendor meetings, and public appearances, yet something had shifted between Victoria and me. The arrangement still existed on paper, but real life had started slipping through the cracks. On Wednesday afternoon, we attended a charity luncheon downtown. The ballroom was crowded with donors, reporters, and executives, all eager for a glimpse of the famously private CEO and her unexpected companion. I had expected the attention to feel uncomfortable. Instead, what unsettled me was how natural it felt standing beside Victoria. We moved through conversations with an ease that should not have existed after such a short time. At one point, a reporter asked how long we had been together. Before I could panic, Victoria answered smoothly, "Long enough to know she always steals the blankets." The room laughed. I laughed too. Yet when I looked at her, I realized she was smiling directly at me. Not at the audience, not at the cameras, at me. Later that evening, we escaped the formal event and walked several blocks through downtown Chicago. Fresh snow covered the sidewalks. Storefront windows glowed with holiday lights. Somewhere in the distance, a street musician played a slow version of an old Christmas song. The city felt softer than usual, almost magical. "You are very good at this," Victoria said as we crossed a small bridge overlooking the river. "At what?" "Making complicated things feel simple." I tucked my hands deeper into my coat pockets. "That is literally my job." "No." Her voice was quieter now. "I mean life." The compliment caught me off guard. I stared out across the water to avoid looking directly at her. "You give me too much credit." "I do not think I do." For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Snowflakes drifted through the glow of nearby streetlights. The cold air carried the faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a vendor half a block away. It was one of those small, perfect moments that somehow felt larger than itself. The following day brought another challenge. Victoria's family was hosting an early holiday gathering at their estate outside the city. Technically, it was one of the reasons she needed me there in the first place. As we drove through the iron gates, I noticed her grip tighten slightly on the steering wheel. She had insisted on driving herself, another victory for my condition. "Nervous?" I asked. She laughed softly. "Terrified." That answer surprised me. Victoria Hayes intimidated boardrooms full of investors. Yet her family clearly affected her differently. The house itself was enormous, decorated with enough lights to illuminate a small town. Inside, relatives filled every room. Conversations paused the moment we entered. I felt dozens of curious eyes settle on us. Instinctively, Victoria moved closer, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. Throughout the evening, introductions blurred together. Cousins, uncles, family friends. Questions arrived nonstop. How did we meet? Where did we live? What were our plans after New Year's? Every answer required careful improvisation. Yet the strangest part was how often I caught Victoria watching me, during dinner, across crowded rooms, even while speaking with someone else. Once, while standing beside a fireplace, I turned unexpectedly and found her already looking at me. Neither of us looked away immediately. Something warm passed between us, something impossible to explain. Much later, after the party ended, we sat in her car outside my apartment building. Snow rested across the windshield. The city was quiet. Neither of us seemed eager to end the evening. "You were incredible tonight," Victoria said. "I barely did anything. You made it easier." Her gray eyes reflected the dashboard lights. For a moment, she looked less like a billionaire executive and more like a woman carrying years of loneliness she rarely allowed anyone to see. My chest tightened unexpectedly. "You know," I said softly, "you do not have to carry everything alone." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Victoria stared at me. Something vulnerable flickered across her face. Then she smiled. Small, genuine, beautiful. "Neither do you, Claire." And as I walked toward my apartment a few minutes later, I realized I had stopped thinking about how this arrangement would end, which was probably the most dangerous thing of all. New Year's Eve arrived wrapped in snowfall and anticipation. By late afternoon, the ballroom at the Chicago Grand Hotel had transformed into something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers reflected thousands of tiny lights. Fresh flowers lined every table. A live orchestra tuned their instruments near the stage. Everywhere I looked, people were celebrating new beginnings. Yet, despite spending weeks planning every detail, I found it impossible to focus on the event itself. My attention kept drifting toward Victoria. She arrived shortly before the guests, wearing a dark emerald gown that somehow made her gray eyes appear even brighter. When she stepped into the ballroom, conversation seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. It was not simply because she was successful. It was because she carried herself with a quiet confidence that drew people in without effort. For a moment, she stood across the room searching through the crowd. The instant her gaze found mine, she smiled. That smile stayed with me for the rest of the evening. As guests arrived, we moved through the ballroom together. Investors, politicians, business leaders, family members, reporters. Everyone wanted a few moments of Victoria's attention, yet somehow she always returned to my side. More than once, I noticed people exchanging knowing looks. They believed the story we had created. The strange part was that it no longer felt entirely like a story. Around 9 o'clock, the orchestra began playing slower music. Couples drifted toward the dance floor beneath the golden lights. I was reviewing final event notes when Victoria appeared beside me, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "You have been working all night," she said. "Someone has to make sure this event survives." The event survived hours ago. She offered me one of the glasses. "Take a break." Before I could object, she extended her hand. My heart immediately forgot how to behave. "Victoria," her smile softened. "One dance, Claire." The ballroom suddenly felt much warmer than it had 5 seconds earlier. Around us, dozens of couples were already moving across the floor. Every reasonable excuse disappeared from my mind. Slowly, I placed my hand in hers. The music wrapped around us as we joined the crowd. Neither of us spoke at first. We simply moved together beneath the lights while the orchestra played. Her hand rested lightly against mine. Nothing dramatic, nothing inappropriate. Yet the closeness felt significant, meaningful. My pulse was painfully aware of every second. "You seem nervous," Victoria said quietly. "I could say the same thing about you." A soft laugh escaped her. "Fair." For a few moments we danced in comfortable silence. Then she looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Vulnerability. Real vulnerability. "Thank you," she said, "for agreeing to all of this." I swallowed. "You do not need to keep thanking me." "I think I do." Something in her voice made my chest tighten. Before I could respond, applause erupted from the crowd as the song ended. The moment broke, yet the feeling remained. As midnight approached, excitement spread throughout the ballroom. The orchestra paused. Guests gathered near the stage. Large digital clocks appeared on screens around the room. 10 minutes until the new year. Victoria and I stood together near the center of the celebration, while confetti cannons waited above the ceiling beams. The countdown began at 60 seconds. Cheers echoed through the ballroom. People raised glasses. Cameras flashed. I should have been focused on the crowd. Instead, I found myself looking at Victoria. She was already looking at me. 30 seconds. 20. 15. The noise around us seemed to fade. 10, 9, 8. My heart pounded. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The ballroom exploded with applause, music, and celebration as midnight arrived. Confetti filled the air like falling stars. For a brief moment, neither of us moved. Then Victoria stepped slightly closer. Her expression was filled with warmth, gratitude, and something deeper I could not quite name. "Happy New Year, Claire," she said softly. "Happy New Year, Victoria." Neither of us looked away, and standing there beneath a storm of gold and silver confetti, I realized I was no longer worried about how this arrangement would end. I was terrified of how much I wanted it not to. The morning after the celebration felt strangely quiet. Snow still covered the city, softening the noise outside my apartment windows. For the first time in weeks, there was nowhere urgent to be. No gala, no interviews, no family appearances. The arrangement was essentially over. That realization should have brought relief. Instead, it left an uncomfortable emptiness I could not ignore. Around noon, Victoria stopped by with coffee and pastries from a bakery she had discovered during our week together. Oliver greeted her like a returning hero. We spent the afternoon talking about nothing important: movies, travel, books. The kinds of conversations people have when they simply enjoy being around each other. More than once, I caught myself forgetting that our time was supposed to be temporary. Then my phone rang. It was Samantha, Victoria's assistant. "I am sorry to bother you," she said, "but there is a folder in the executive office that belongs to you. Victoria asked me to make sure you receive it." I frowned. "A folder? It appears to contain personal documents." An hour later, I stopped by Hayes Global on my way home. Most employees were still enjoying the holiday break. The building felt unusually quiet. Samantha handed me a slim leather folder and wished me a happy new year before disappearing down the hallway. Curious, I opened it as soon as I reached the elevator. The first thing I saw was a photograph. My photograph, not a recent one, an old one, at least 11 years old. I stared at it in confusion. The picture showed me standing outside a community fundraising event, wearing a volunteer badge and holding a donation box. I remembered the event vaguely. It had taken place years before my marriage ended, years before I started my company, years before I ever heard the name Victoria Hayes. My pulse quickened. Beneath the photograph was another, and another. Different events, different years. Every image included me. None of them had been taken recently. By the time I reached the parking garage, my hands were trembling. At the bottom of the folder, I found a handwritten note. "Claire, if you are reading this, then I owe you the truth." My heart skipped. I immediately called Victoria. She answered on the first ring. "You found it." It was not a question. "What is this?" Silence filled the line for several seconds. "Can we talk?" 20 minutes later, we sat across from each other in her office. The city skyline stretched behind her windows. For the first time since meeting her, Victoria looked genuinely nervous. I placed the photographs on the desk between us. "Start explaining." She took a slow breath. 11 years ago, I attended a fundraising event on the South Side. The memory clearly meant something to her. At that point in my life, everything revolved around work. I was exhausted, burned out, completely disconnected from everyone around me. Her fingers brushed the edge of one photograph. I almost left after 10 minutes. I looked down at the image. And a faint smile appeared. "You stopped me." Confusion washed over me. "I did?" "You asked me to help." I searched my memory. Slowly, fragments returned. A crowded community center. Volunteers collecting donations. A woman standing alone near the exit. "You were there?" Victoria nodded. "You spoke to me for less than 5 minutes." Her smile deepened slightly. "You told me that success meant very little if it prevented me from enjoying my own life." I stared at her. The words sounded familiar, like something I would have said without realizing it mattered. That conversation changed me. My chest tightened. "Victoria, you probably forgot about it the next day." Her voice remained gentle. "I never did." The room fell completely silent. Every strange look, every moment of recognition, every unanswered question suddenly made sense. "You knew who I was from the beginning." "Yes. When we first met, yes." I shook my head in disbelief. "The gala, the proposal, all of it." She looked directly into my eyes. "I spent 11 years hoping I would see you again." My breath caught. "There was no family emergency forcing this arrangement." Victoria smiled sadly. "My family is difficult. That part was true, but that was not the real reason." "No." Her voice softened. "The real reason was you." For several seconds I could not speak. The city stretched beyond the office windows exactly as it had an hour earlier, yet everything felt different. 11 years. 11 years of carrying a memory that I barely remembered and she had never forgotten. I looked down at the photographs scattered across the desk, different versions of me, different seasons of my life. Through all of them, somehow, Victoria had been holding on to a moment that I had considered ordinary. "Why did you never say anything?" I finally asked. Victoria released a slow breath. "Because I was afraid." The answer surprised me more than anything else. "You?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Believe it or not, yes." I shook my head. "You run one of the largest companies in the country. That is business." Her gray eyes held mine. "You were different." The honesty in her voice made my chest ache. Suddenly, every piece of the puzzle fit together. The way she looked at me during our first meeting, the details she remembered, the strange sense of familiarity I could never explain. None of it had been accidental. "So what happens now?" I asked quietly. For the first time since I met her, Victoria seemed unsure. "That depends on you." Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, just honest. The arrangement was finished. The holidays were over. There were no more obligations keeping us together. No contracts, no appearances, no excuses, only truth. I stood and walked toward the window. Snow drifted across the Chicago skyline. People hurried along the sidewalks below, beginning another ordinary day. Funny how life-changing moments never announce themselves. They arrive quietly, disguised as conversations in offices or unexpected invitations or memories from 11 years ago. "You know what the strangest part is?" I asked. Victoria stepped beside me. "What?" I smiled softly. "I thought you were the one pretending all week." Her expression filled with curiosity. "What do you mean?" I looked at her, really looked at her. "I was pretending too." Understanding slowly appeared in her eyes. Warmth followed. Neither of us needed to say the words out loud. They already existed in every conversation we had shared. Every walk through the city, every dinner, every laugh, every moment neither of us wanted to end. A few weeks later, life settled into something new. Not perfect, not dramatic, just real. Victoria still worked too much sometimes. I still overcommitted to projects. Oliver remained convinced he was the most important member of the household whenever Victoria visited. Yet somehow we fit. Not because we planned it, because we stopped fighting it. 6 months later, on a warm summer evening overlooking Lake Michigan, we hosted a small gathering with friends and family. No reporters, no cameras, no grand performance, just the people who mattered most. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Victoria found my hand and squeezed it gently. "You know," she said, smiling, "this is not how I imagined any of this happening." "Me neither." "Do you regret it?" I laughed. "The fake marriage? The entire ridiculous journey." I looked around at the people we loved, at Oliver chasing a tennis ball across the grass, at the woman beside me who had once entered my life with an impossible proposal and changed everything. Then I shook my head. Not for a second. Her smile was brighter than the sunset. Sometimes people spend years searching for the right person in all the wrong places. Sometimes the right person is already carrying a memory of you, waiting for life to bring you back together. And sometimes the most important chapter of your story begins with something that was never supposed to be real. If this story touched your heart, comment the number 8 below. Maybe your story will remind someone else that it is never too late for an unexpected new beginning.